Hi everyone, I hope you're suitably refreshed and ready to look at some wider therapeutic opportunities for treating Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Guiding us through all the latest developments, we're joined once more by Professor Michela Guglieri, who's the Senior Clinical Lecturer and Consultant Neurologist at Newcastle University and Newcastle Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust.
Wow, never had that. Thank you again. I will carry on a little bit of a strange title, I think, because when you think about other therapeutic approaches in clinic and why we need it, I thought, okay, what do we focus on and what is becoming available, what is maybe one day become available. These are my disclosure. I have to admit that maybe in my disclosure I need to declare that the slide that I will present today has been requested by me to the companies that have developed the drug in order to give a full overview when data were not available. But I thought to focus on two key points or key approaches, that is vamorolone and givinostat. First of all, because a few of you have approached me over the last day talking about vamorolone, I thought that sooner or later I needed to talk about this. But the reason why I choose these two molecules specifically is because they are the two molecules that have been in clinical trial over the last 5+ years and are now facing the stage of the regulatory approval. So I want to declare now that our drugs that are not currently available in the UK, and none of us is able to prescribe them, is still obviously when we are waiting for the regulatory approval response, I cannot guarantee whether they will become available. I quite often cannot provide an exact date or who they will become available for. Okay? But these two molecules are the ones that are currently going to the regulatory approval. You will hear more and more about these two molecules in the next 1, 2, 3, 6, 12 months, and are the ones that might become available into clinic in the closest future. So, but when we talk about other therapeutic approaches in the clinic, what do we mean? So what I wanted to discuss, I'm not very good with this, is obviously Duchenne muscular dystrophy is due to the lack of dystrophin. That is the problem. Okay, there is a change in the DMD gene, and that is the problem. And obviously, what we have heard today from Francesco is focused on trying to correct this problem. But when the dystrophin is missing, so this protein, this ingredient of the muscles is missing, a few events happen. That is what at the end lead to the fact that the muscle is wasted, and there is these images that you've seen, that the muscle is replaced by fat, and this obviously is not as strong as the proper muscle. And this is a process that doesn't happen in one day, but continue throughout the lifespan. And there is an initial response in the inflammation, but the continued inflammation and the continued attempt to repair the muscles lead to actually loss of muscles that is replaced by fibrosis of fibrotic tissues or fat tissues, and that is what is the results. So what I will focus now is these two approaches that, as I mentioned, are the ones that are closer potentially to clinic, that really target predominantly these pathways. So they don't intervene at this stage, but is what I say is the downstream effect of the lack of dystrophin in muscles. So I start with vamorolone. And again, conflict of interest. I was involved in the drug development program for vamorolone through the Horizon 2020 grant, but I don't have any commercial interest for vamorolone. So why do we talk about vamorolone? And probably most of you know, vamorolone is encouraging. It's the first drug that has been approved by all the regulatory authorities, FDA, EMA, and MHRA. So for who is less familiar, the FDA is in the United States has approved vamorolone. It's agam-3, but I cannot say that word, sorry, so I will carry on to call it vamorolone. In October, the EMA in Europe in December 2023, and in January 2024, we have the MHRA approval in the UK for vamorolone. I will go back to this because there are some differences in the approval, but first let's go into the drug itself. So one thing that I want to mention is why are we thinking about vamorolone and why there is vamorolone. And I want to reinforce the fact that the first stepping point is because is a steroid work in Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We can talk about gene therapy, exon skipping, and a lot of other approaches. But so far, the drug that is commercially available to everyone is corticosteroid, and they've demonstrated that there is a benefit. They improve muscle strength and function and maintain muscle strength and function over a certain period of time. It's not a solution, but they work. The problem with corticosteroid is that they have a lot of side effects. So the idea of vamorolone initially was if we can produce a drug that maintains the benefit of corticosteroid but does not have the side effects, probably we are in a very good position in Duchenne. But this is the ideal world. So what they've done is to create a molecule that is very similar to corticosteroid. So the only change, everything is the same, and the only change is at this point. So it's still part of the corticosteroid family. It's not a different drug. And because it's still part of the steroid family, although they try to separate the benefit of corticosteroid that is more the anti-inflammatory action, and to isolate what we said that are the GRE effect that we think that are associated with side effects, it's not easy to completely dissociate the two points. So that was the attempt, and then the result I will present, I will show you that they manage in some sense, but probably not in all of them. And the other problem is that we do not completely know why corticosteroid work in Duchenne. So yes, they have the anti-inflammatory action that is then NFK beta activity, but probably there are a lot of other action that corticosteroid have in muscle in boys with Duchenne, which are not fully understood. So separate the benefit and effect is an attempt, but it's very difficult to do it neatly. So the other thing that I want to mention is what I present and what we will need to make a decision about vamorolone. And the same is for the regulatory authorities that need to make a decision about shall we approve the vamorolone, shall we not approve the vamorolone, who should receive vamorolone, who should not receive vamorolone, is based on the data that we have so far. That is a very typical drug development for any clinic, any drug. When we come into patient, so before there is in animal models, so preclinical. Here they go in a phase 1, that in this case was done in adult volunteers, and was a small group to show is it safe to be given. Then they moved to a phase 2A study when they enrolled 48 boys with Duchenne muscular dystrophy between the age of 4 and 7, and were treated over an initial period of time of only 6 months, and then they continue to receive the drug in what we say the LTE, the long-term extension study. So this is a relatively small number of boys, relatively young, that receive in this phase different doses of vamorolone, and then they continue to receive vamorolone for up to 30 months. And then we have the phase 2B, and some of the 2A study was run in the UK, as well as the phase 2B study. And this is is a study that is designed to collect strong evidence. So it's a double-blind registration, so the data that we present to the authority, where vamorolone was compared to prednisone and placebo. And the 2B study was a placebo control group for 6 months, then carry on for 1 year, and then after that, they will all be moved out of a clinical trial and continue to receive the drug under compassionate use. So we do not have data within a trial. But I want to mention also that there is a lot of still going on vamorolone, and there are ongoing clinical trials, not in the UK, but in the US, studying the effect of vamorolone in other age group, 2 to 4 and 7 to 18, and in other dystrophy disease that is similar to Duchenne, that is Becker muscular dystrophy. So this is what we know about the safety and efficacy of vamorolone. What I presented, so this is the phase 2B study, so 6 months vamorolone, prednisone versus placebo, following by other 6 months where everybody received vamorolone either at 2 or 6 milligrams. And then we have the data from this study, that is the open label study, so everybody received the vamorolone. In this very colorful part is because they received different doses of vamorolone, and then is the exposure to 6 milligrams, or in green to 2 milligrams, okay? And when we talk about this is about 130 patients, and this is about 48 patients. So the maximum exposure that we have known about vamorolone is up to 30 months. So if anybody has a question about what happened after 20 years or 10 years, don't ask, because we do not know. But what do we know? So in terms of efficacy, we know that the study that the phase 2b, the strong study, let's say, over the first 6 months, vamorolone showed an improvement in all motor function outcomes, okay, compared to placebo. So, So this is the time to stand, so get up from the floor, the time to walk or run at 10 meters, the North Star, and you should all be familiar with this outcome measure. And you can see in green is the 6 milligrams, they all improved. And the one that received placebo over the first 6 months actually were stable. They did not show an improvement. Going forward, the result of this 12-month study confirmed that actually the improvement, the effect of the 6 milligrams less of the 2 milligrams, but the 6 milligrams showed that the effect of vamorolone in terms of improving muscle strength and function continue up to 48 weeks, so 1 year. But we need to compare to prednisone or corticosteroid. So when we compare to traditional corticosteroids, so prednisone or deflazacort, the 6 months study showed that the vamorolone 6 milligrams, that in this is in violet, show overall similar effect in all functional outcome, that is the time to stand, so get up from the floor, climb 4 steps, time to run or walk 10 meters, 6 minutes walking test, the North Star, overall similar effect to prednisone. The 2 milligrams of vamorolone was similar in some of the effect, but was a little bit less compared to prednisone up to 6 months. Then what we do, because we wanted to have a little bit more data above the 6 months, so what the Revergent of the company did is to try to compare the open label data up to 30 months to natural history data. And these are the synergy data that I mentioned yesterday and the North Star data. That is what all of you contribute to, produced. And so they compare the study data, the clinical trial data, with the data from these natural history or national databases, and trying to match boys that has the same age and has the same period of exposure to corticosteroid. And what they show is that overall, it seems that vamorolone has a similar effect to corticosteroid in all motor function outcomes. So overall, up to 30 months, they seem to match. Obviously, when you take about a natural history control group, you can't match exactly the same. So some of them are on prednisone, some on deflazacort, some on 10 days on, 10 days off. But overall, up to 30 months, the efficacy data show that the effect is very similar. Then we go to safety. So what the study showed, and I think that both the 12 months and the 30 months data show, is vamorolone is clearly differentiated to traditional corticosteroid on height, which means that the boys that receive vamorolone continue to grow as expected for their age, when we well known that the boys that receive corticosteroid, here is the natural history and this is the 4DMD study, they actually fall down their expected growth. Okay? So a clear differentiation demonstrated in up to 30 months in using different control groups. And the interesting part is also that when we look into the effect when the boys on prednisone, so the one on prednisone, where at 6 months were changed to vamorolone in the phase 2b study, they actually catch up with growth. So in this phase, this one receive prednisone, and then they switch to vamorolone, and they catch up with the height. So then we look into other side effects. The other things that we notice, and this is a comparison between the vamorolone data, and is not the final data, so it's not been formally published, but what they notice that these are the data from the 4DMD study comparing daily prednisone, daily deflazacort, and 10 days on, 10 days off of prednisone, and we compare to the data from the vamorolone. And what they notice is that there is a reduction in the risk of and the severity of vertebral fractures, but it's still not zero, so it's not that the one on vamorolone did not have any fracture, but the frequency or the risk of fracture was lower in the one that received vamorolone compared to the one that received daily deflazacort or daily prednisone. What about other side effects? We look at the weight, and what the study shows that vamorolone shows a similar effect on weight gain compared to traditional corticosteroid. Again, this is from the phase 2b study. In red is the prednisone, and the other one is the light and dark blue are vamorolone. And here is when compared with the natural history study up to 30 months, they are very similar. Other side effects, adrenal suppression. What the study showed that is very complicated, but the point is how do you measure adrenal suppression? But the bottom point is that vamorolone, the study has shown that vamorolone causes adrenal suppression, as prednisone and the Deflazacort do. Okay, so we have not solved all the problem. But one important point that I want to highlight, because it's not always mentioned, so vamorolone is a mineral corticoid antagonist, similar to other drugs that we prescribe in Duchenne, that is a eplerenone or spironolactone. And if you know, these drugs are prescribed to protect the heart. We don't really have any data about does vamorolone protect the heart. Might protect the heart, and there are studies that are planned to investigate this aspect more. But the important point is that we also need to understand when we give vamorolone and the eplerenone and spironolactone, what happens, how we combine effect. So I think that we still need to answer. I want to mention at the beginning, so the drug has been approved by the MHRA, FDA, and EMA. Drug approval is a complex field that I still struggle to understand, but the interesting part is that this is the approval, I don't expect you to read it, but the EMA and MHRA has approved vamorolone as a dissociative corticosteroid. Bottom one is still a corticosteroid. They call it dissociative to highlight the fact that for at least some side effects is different. The problem is that because they call it dissociative, if you look into the label in a way, what they say, the characteristic of the drug, what does the drug do, they do not mention any side effects that have not been investigated in the study. So they don't mention whether does vamorolone do anything on puberty, does vamorolone do anything on Cushingoid, on behavior. They don't mention anything because these data are not available clearly from the clinical trial. And they don't take the fact that it's still a corticosteroid. The EMA has a completely different approach, and they say it's a corticosteroid, and has all the side effects as traditional corticosteroid, which is still not very accurate because they actually grow. So we need to be very careful about how do we inform you as family, but also clinician about this, because sometimes the license itself is not very helpful. But we need to be careful. And the point is that this one does not mention, for example, that is a mineral corticoid antagonist. So the effect on heart is not even mentioned. So, key point that I want you to remember. Vamorolone is a corticosteroid. The current evidence seems that show that 6 milligrams of vamorolone up to 30 months seems to have a similar efficacy, so effect on motor function and strength, than traditional corticosteroid. Again, based on the current evidences, it seems that vamorolone has a better impact on growth, allowing the boys to grow, and has a better impact on bone health, but has very similar side effects profile in terms of weight gain and in terms of adrenal suppression. But the side effects profile of other aspects is still unknown. So, and a lot of questions that have been asked. What happens if you switch from prednisone to vamorolone? There are no data on that. They are currently collected in the clinical trial that I presented in the 006 study, where they also treat boys that have been on corticosteroid and switched to vamorolone. But at the moment, we have limited evidences on that. But they will come. We do not really know so far, about the effect of vamorolone after loss of ambulation in adult. Again, is currently investigated, but we do not have that data at the moment. But there are a lot of data that will be generated. And if you think about when we start prescribing traditional corticosteroid, there was a lot of unknown. So it's not a situation that we are not familiar with. We just need to be aware of what we know and what we do not know. And the most important that we need to collect the data, because if vamorolone become available in the UK, we are part of this data generation. But we only generate the data working together, clinician and patient community. So I move on to the second molecule that I want to mention, that is givinostat. And I think that it's a little bit less known in general in the patient community, givinostat, but again, is in a very similar, let's say, setting, a little bit behind in terms of regulatory process, but this is a drug that has been tested in clinical trial over the last 5+ years, and as I will mention, the phase 3 study has shown promising result, and the company is now going through the regulatory process. So it's not a drug that might become available in the relatively near future. It's a much more complex drug in terms of how does it work, because it has not one mechanism of action. It's not simply an anti-inflammatory, it's not simply an antifibrotic, it's not simply something, but it's what we call, you will say, is the histone, oops, sorry, I will get better, an histone deacetylase inhibitors. And what it does, in a way, interact with inflammatory process, so reduce the inflammation, but acting on a different mechanism of inflammation compared to vamorolone or corticosteroid, but also have an impact on the regeneration of the muscles. And in the regeneration of the muscles, avoid in a way that the repeated regeneration lead to the increase of fibrosis and fat tissues, but try to regenerate cells, muscles. So again, drug development program of givinostat, and I want just to show you, it's nothing that happened in one day. It's quite long. So there are different studies. Again, started with the phase 1-2 study, 20 ambulatory boys, age 7 to 11 with DMD. Then they moved to the phase 3 study, that is the one that has been run in the UK, when we have almost 180 boys that were recruited, but this was a placebo-controlled study, so 120 treated and 60 receiving placebo. And then all boys who took part in these two studies were offered the access to continue to have access to the drug to an open-label extension study, which is still running in the UK and in other countries. Again, plan, which I think that is interesting, that we'll have a last slide. So there is the Ulysses studies that is planned and is just open to recruitment in the UK. That is a phase 3 study, non-ambulatory boys, age 9 to 18. So it's non-ambulatory, but still pediatric. And they aim to recruit about 140 boys, young man. And then we have a phase 2 study, open label, in the very young one that is planned is to prove the safety, so small numbers. So what I want to focus on is the result of the phase 3 study, because it's where we have our evidence, stronger evidence about what does the drug do in skeletal muscles. So this, is, as I mentioned, was a phase 3 study, has a screening period, and then it has a placebo-control phase up to 72 weeks. So this is 18 months. So it's a long study where boys were asked to take placebo for 18 months. And then everybody was in on an open-label phase. That the study recruited boys that has age 4 and plus, and that's a specific characteristic, and it was 2 different groups. They knew there was group A was the population where they would expect the maximum effect of the drug. But they didn't want to close the label to that small group, and therefore they recruited group B when it was only for safety, but at least they could demonstrate that the drug could be safely administered in a broader number of boys. So what did the study show? The study met the primary endpoint. So we have 2 positive studies in 1 year, actually, very time results. The study, again, different primary endpoint, but also different population. These are boys age 6 and above. And the primary endpoint was the time to climb 4 steps, and they're standardized steps. And here you can see that in 18 months, the drug took less to get up 4 steps compared to the one that received placebo. You can see that it takes time sometimes for the drug to look an effect. And sometimes if we would have done, I always say, this study would have stopped at the 12 months, probably would have not met the primary endpoint. So it would have been a negative study, end of the story. So when we think about placebo-controlled study, I think that is why. Duchenne is not a rapid condition, and sometimes we need time to see the effect, especially for drugs that are not a cure, but might make a difference. What else? And I think that the results were relatively consistent, so it's not looking only in the time to climb 4 steps, but in all outcome measure, overall they show the positive effect of givinostat. This is a statistical thing, don't ask me to explain it, because I will be the worst one. But the point is very simple, this is in favor of givinostat, this is in favor of the control. And if the blue spot is on this side, is in favor, and is on this side, is not in favor. And you can see that all of them are here, although there are a few time to rise from the floor, 6 minutes walking test, and the muscle strength overall on the elbow, that are just crossing this line. You need to consider that in the 6-year and older, some of the boys lose the ability to get up from the floor, and therefore it was not possible to collect that data. But overall, I think encouraging result from an efficacy point of view. It was also an interesting, this is another actually, because I thought to put it in because you are more familiar also with the North Star, and the North Star is a more overall impression of muscle function. And again, very consistent result that the one that received givinostat deteriorate less on the North Star compared on the control. So it's not an improvement, it's not even a stabilization, but they deteriorate less. Interesting, they also have something that you probably have to talk about, that is the muscle MRI. And this is probably one of the first studies to show a positive effect of a drug on a muscle MRI. And the muscle MRI is an indirect way to measure fat. So if you have a muscle MRI, the black one is muscle, the white one is fat. And what they show is that givinostat show less white when between if we look into the changes between baseline and 18 months, the changes in the boys who received givinostat were less prominent compared to the changes that the placebo group received. So, safety-wise, I think that the drug was overall well tolerated, but has some side effects that were expected. So the most common side effects of givinostat that have been noted in the study are what we call is diarrhea, thrombocytopenia, that is the reduction in the platelets, severe reduction in platelets could have problem with the coagulation, and hypertriglyceridemia, I think. Anyway, is high triglyceride in the blood, so it's something that is about the metabolism of fat. But none of these abnormalities actually were associated with clinical manifestations, so none of them has bleeding problem or anything, but were noted in the study. And in some cases, both the reduction in the platelets and the high triglycerides led to requiring a reduction into the dose of the drug in order to minimize. We don't want to go too low or too high with the triglyceride. For the reduction in the platelets, they were mild, and they were always reversible. Once the drug was discontinued, then the lower dose restarted. And then also the high level of triglyceride was mild to moderate. Interesting, I think that I want to mention this because just last week, the first site in the UK is open recruitment for the Ulysses study, that this is the study in the older non-ambulatory boys with DMD that will receive givinostat. Again, is a placebo-controlled study. Currently is open in Glasgow, but other sites will take part in the study and hopefully open in the next few weeks or months. And I cannot not advertise the central recruitment database, so if anybody is interested to take part, the best way is to register through the central recruitment database, and Phil is sitting just outside. So, key point for givinostat, so the phase 2 and 3 studies also, the phase 2 very consistent, show overall a positive effect of givinostat on reducing the fibrosis and the fat deposition in muscle as demonstrated by the muscle MRI. And the phase 3 study met the primary endpoint, so showed that givinostat reduced the decline in muscle function over an 18 months treatment period. That overall was well tolerated, and the side effects that were noted are manageable but required a reduction in the dose of the drug. And as I mentioned, is currently going through the regulatory process. I think that I'm now, just to give a little bit of an update, has been submitted to the FDA, has been submitted to the EMA, and there are the companies currently discussing with MHRA and NICE to move it forward also in that perspective. I just really, a couple of slides, I don't want to go to the detail, but why do we need it? Do we still need intervention that target that part? Is that important, and why is it important? And I think that's, first of all, and there's a general explanation about why it's so complex. So Duchenne is not an easy condition, but also you need to think that the skeletal muscle are the biggest organ that we have in our body. So we have a lot of muscles. And in Duchenne, we need to target all of them. And sometimes it's very difficult for any approach to target every single muscle or every single muscle cells. And it's quite likely that a combination of the approach will be required in order to have the best effect at the end. But also because Duchenne is complex. It's not just the skeletal muscles, but it's also the breathing muscle, the diaphragm, the heart muscle. And these muscles are slightly different and respond to the lack of dystrophin slightly different. And therefore, again, one solution might not be the final response answer. And then it's progressive. So, it's a progressive condition that changes over time. And if we can, and dilute over time because we grow, and the muscle grows with us. So if we can try to keep the muscle as healthy as possible with intervention that do not target dystrophin, give more time to intervention that target dystrophin to act. Or if the intervention that target dystrophin do not fit all muscle and all cells, keep the other one as healthy as we can. And again, that I think because there is a lot of failure in Duchenne, but also some success. But as that is maybe tell us that it's not one answer, one drug, and will fit the problem. We need to think a little bit more broader. And I cannot stop it without thanks everyone who contribute to all these clinical trials. And I think that not just givinostat and vamorolone, but every single study are possible. Yes, because there is the companies. Yes, because there are clinicians that want to take them. But it's the great effort of the families and the great effort of children and young men who put a lot of change their life in order to take part in clinical trials. So it's massive thank you, because we will not have this answer, positive or negative, without the contribution of all parties involved. So massive thank you. And then it's just the Newcastle team.
Thank you, Michela, for the presentation. Always very good. I have a grandson at 4-year-old who is about to start steroids. Which steroid would you recommend he takes?
Ooh. It's very difficult. And the difficulties here is that I do not have an answer. And then is why we talk about still different corticosteroids. And a lot of this discussion is also dependent on the individual, and is a decision that you make with the family, and you make with the boy in front of you how he's doing. So let's say, keeping aside the vamorolone, between the prednisone and the flazacort, probably the statement that I can feel to do is that I would highly recommend the daily compared to intermittent, in terms of trying to maximize the effect and the benefit. Then, again, it's an individual case, so there are other things that need to be considered, but if I've been put on the spot, that will be my suggestion. Between prednisone and the flazacort, I think that really are very equivalent in terms of efficacy. That is my impression. There might be some different, there are some that say that the flazacort might be better in the very long period of time, but other studies do not show that, so I think that are weak evidences of that. And therefore really depend on the boy that you have in front of you. And you take the element, say, prednisone is probably better on height, but worse on weight. The flazacort is worse on height, better on weight. What is more important? What are the concerns within the family? How is the boy doing? So it's really a discussion that you take. With vamorolone is really a lot of unknown, and again, a lot of involvement of the family in this decision. I always said, in general, never take what is available now and do not wait for something that might become available in the future and might not. because at that point, for other reason, you might actually not be able to get it, and then it's the frustration to have missed the opportunity. That is my statement for any clinical trial, any drug, etc. It's difficult now, because obviously, I probably didn't mention, but the vamorolone is currently going through NICE, and will NICE to decide whether it's becoming available and for whom. And the indication, so they might say that only boys who have never been treated with corticosteroid before can receive the drug, or can be that everybody can receive the drug. And I promise I don't have any clue at this point. So in a 4-year-old, do you want to wait for vamorolone for these 4 months because of the possibility? If I tell you in 6 months, a year, I would say no, don't do it. 4 months, again, is depend of how the boy is, how the family, but also with the knowledge that family who start a journey with vamorolone will have a lot of unknown, and can be good or can be worse, and we don't know. And this is something that is not black and white, and there's a family who will want to take that risk and family who will not want to take that risk, and I would fully respect both. So sorry, it's just a... No, I know her.
Hello. On the first couple of slides we were showing with the vamorolone, there was like a stark difference between 0.2 milligrams and 0.6 milligrams in terms of like the sort of measurements and the outcomes. Do you think you would have seen even better results if you'd gone to 0.9 milligrams, for example, or why didn't we look at that?
We don't really. The reality is that we do not know. But let's talk about the fact that it's still a corticosteroid. So if you look into, there were some very, very, very old data from on prednisone, and they demonstrated that the doses up to 1 milligram, 1.5 milligrams was not better than 0.75 milligrams. And you always need to consider that, again, it's still a steroid and still have side effects. So even if it potentially has a better improvement in muscle strength, then if they gain more weight, then do you really have the benefit? So there is no currently plan to go above the 6 milligrams. The 6 milligrams is determined by animal models when you think that you reach that saturation in terms of benefit. So you come out with 6 with a rationale based on preclinical data. It's not that it's just a number, a random number. There is more the discussion about nobody's really investigated if 6 is good but has side effects, 2 is less good but has less side effects. What about 4? What about 5? What about 2? And I want here to drop a message. So there is a plan. So the one in the extension study, they were allowed to move between 6, 4, and 2, as we do with corticosteroid. Not everybody will be on 0.75 milligrams. But one very strong message here for me, we are trying in the UK, through the DMD Care UK project, to, if vamorolone become available, to standardize the use of vamorolone. If everybody starts to take, I take 6, I take 5, I take 3.2, I take 10 days on, 10 days off, 2 days on, we will never have the answer on all of the questions that we have. And we will be same situation as corticosteroid, that after 30 years we're still asking, which one do you prescribe? Don't know.
Thank you, Michela. That was such a great presentation and really well answered questions. In the vamorolone data, you said that there was an impact on bone health in terms of vertebral fracture. But as we know, boys do come off their feet and stop walking because of long bone fractures when they break their legs. Is there any data on the impact of vamorolone on long bone fractures?
Let's say not for the clinical trials. Okay, so from both the open label, so the 30 months, or the placebo control, there are no data on long bone fracture. But it's very difficult to say because it's a relatively small number, very relatively small duration. I generally don't know if anyone has long bone fracture if they had a small number. And as you know, one of the problems with the bone fracture is that if you have a fracture when you're on holiday, you have an X-ray, and it's very difficult for me to have access to that X-ray. So I know that you have a fracture, but I don't have much more data. There are emerging data on, so what we need to know is more about, there are a lot of boys that are on compassionate use or early access program, and then is much longer exposure. And there are no data in the public domain that they report what is going on. So I don't know how many have fractured. Does this different to the population? That is something that we do not know. Also because each single country have different programs, so there is no real collection of data for that perspective. There are some, obviously, there are some anecdotal data that some of the boy has fracture, but I think that is too early to say is less than with prednisone or is the same. It's also that there is a lot of unknown about this boy growth. So the bone is longer. Do they actually, what is the impact of growth on muscle strength factor, but what is the impact of growth on bone? If we don't make the bone stronger and then it's long, is a problem, are all questions that we need to answer.
Thank you very much, Professor Guglieri.